What started as a local protest in New York City's Wall Street district quickly spread nationwide in the USA and has now reached 900 countries around the world. Major cities all across Australia have joined in the Occupy movement against corporate greed, social and economic inequality, and bureaucratic influence over governments.
Melbourne is a global solidarity with what's going on with over 1,000 occupations happening all around the world. It started originally at Wall Street, so basically when Wall Street had an uprising of people for a start of a revolution, they decided that an occupation of a public space would be the best way to get their message heard. In their list of demands, they requested that this be a global revolution. And so, yeah, as I said, there's 1,000 occupations happening all over the world. The aim for Occupy Melbourne is basically for a real democracy within Australia and to have our voices heard. The fact that the 1% of people in hierarchy power own all of the wealth and distribute all of the wealth throughout Australia. It means that there's homeless people living on the streets. It means that there's people getting under, like students have major debt just to get an education. There are people who are living below the poverty line, and we're meant to be, a first world country.
Inspired by Occupy Wall Street, the protesters set up tents in the city square on the corner of Swanston and Collins Streets. There was a kitchen stocked with groceries that volunteers used to cook food for everyone. A free store with clothes, shoes, and other donated items was also set up for people to use. However, Lord Mayor Robert Doyle was not pleased and seemed skeptical of the movement. He voiced his dissent during a radio chat with one of the protesters.
It's very, very, very crucial to the future of our democracy that we have this space.
Oh, come on, Nick, you're taking yourself a bit... It's crucial to the future of democracy. I think you're taking yourself a bit seriously.
I don't think we've made any point yet.
Well, what are you doing there then?
We've just opened up this space and we are beginning.
What does that mean? What does that mean? You've opened up this space. I think you'll find City Square was a fairly open space before you arrived, and it will be when you go, Nick.
Well, I understand what the Occupy Wall Street movement's about, but I'm not completely clear on the Occupy Melbourne movement, partly because every time I see them interviewed, they seem to be saying slightly different things, and it doesn't seem to be terribly coherent. So because of that, I don't particularly follow it closely when I then hear it in the media. I think there is a problem when you have a demonstration and it's not focused and it's very diffused, and it comes across as very mixed messages to people. So you're not saying, we support policies for climate change, or we're against, some sort of social movement. Democracy is very hard to change, and democracy isn't very good at reining in excesses of capitalism, excesses of big firms. That's probably true. Although, on the other hand, you can say that the Australian banking system was quite heavily regulated, and that's a democratic system.
After 6 days of occupying City Square, the movement was cut short when Robert Doyle issued eviction orders on the 21st of October. The protesters stood their ground, and what ensued was utter chaos. Police resorted to using mace and forcefully began evicting them from the square, injuring many in the process. Without retaliating, the protesters formed a sea of bodies and began marching up Swanston Street, with the police acting as a live cordon.
The City of Melbourne asked the protesters to remove their tents, and they were given some time to remove them, and then they were asked would they leave, and some of them did and some did not. Law enforcement agencies across the world would have a set standard that the force we use is proportionate to the resistance in force that is used against us. And that would be consistent with what occurred on Friday. Now, whenever you get that sort of situation, you're bound to have two different versions of what occurred. And then we have either a civil litigation system or a judicial system to work it out at the end of the day as to who was right and who was wrong. And that's what it's for, and that's what we have a democracy for. So look, I'm very happy with the way it went from a law enforcement point of view.
After being forcefully evicted from City Square on the 21st, the protesters gathered at Federation Square this afternoon. As the numbers increased, the crowd began marching from Trades Hall and have now reached Treasury Gardens, accompanied by dozens of policemen. The latest press release from Occupy Melbourne's website states that they will continue peacefully occupying public space in a new location. At 12 p.m. on Saturday, the 29th of October, the protesters plan to gather at the State Library and walk to their new home at Treasury Gardens. This is Prakriti Prakash reporting for Spectrum.